In 2012, Canada's Wonderland opened up Leviathan, the very first B&M gigacoaster, and by far the tallest coaster in the nation of Canada. This came on the heels of Behemoth, the B&M Hyper that was introduced 4 years prior, and the debate was on. Which was the best coaster in Canada, Leviathan or Behemoth? Well, a lot of people would say neither, and it's not another 200+ foot modern steel monster that they'd point to. It's a 62-year-old wooden coaster that's 4.5 times shorter than Leviathan. How could this be? Canada's oldest theme park is Playland, located in Vancouver, British Columbia on the west coast. Playland dates back to 1910 and basically operates like a fair. Lots of coasters have come and gone, most of which were small and portable family rides. But there is one reason that people make it a point to visit Vancouver and get to Playland. And no, it's not because their corkscrew coaster was featured in Final Destination 3. It's because of Coaster. Which coaster? Coaster. It's called Coaster. What a terrible name, but what a legendary ride. In 1958, Playland introduced this wooden coaster that stands 68 feet tall, reaches 47 miles per hour, and has less than 3,000 feet of track. Its stats are not impressive. They're pretty similar to Six Flags New England's Thunderbolt. And no offense to Thunderbolt, but nobody's rushing to Agawam, Massachusetts to ride it, the way they make it a point to visit Playland to ride Coaster. My Pacific Northwest trip in 2019 was planned and largely driven by the chance to get on Coaster, and I was able to get 3 rides to see what the hype was all about. This is my experience with the legendary Coaster at Playland. I went to the Pacific Northwest in late August because I wanted to go while the Washington State Fair was open. This worked out perfectly, but there was one downside to this. I went to Playland while it was hosting the PNE Fair. This meant there would be a lot more attractions brought into Playland, but it also meant that this Thursday in the late summer would be extremely crowded. Parking was a huge challenge, but we found a spot, redeemed our all-day pass, and headed straight for Coaster. This isn't a pros and cons video, but I'm still gonna mention quite a few of them here. 2 cons right off the bat. There's no shade in that queue line, and they were running 1 train ops. They do have a second train which was sitting right there in the station for the entire day, despite the coaster having at least a 45-minute wait all day. 1 train ops, long lines, and an unshaded line in late August did not make for a very fun time. Now the good news, and this is a massive pro, is that the dispatches were very quick. The train will unload first on the same side of the station that the ride loads on, and you can pick up your loose articles on the other side of the bins. The train rolls forward and you can step on the train. No air gates, just step in once the train stops, which is pretty common on older wooden coasters. But the main reason for the quick dispatches is the restraints. It's a single position lap bar. It's not even really a buzz bar like you'll find on some PTC trains like Timber Terror or Phoenix, but it acts the same way. It comes down as far as it goes and it stops. And it comes nowhere near your body. You'd think the ride isn't that aggressive given the lack of a real restraint, but you would be wrong. It's really a miracle that in the 62 years that this coaster has been operating, nobody has flown out. I'm not even sure how this thing is legal. I don't know anything about Canadian regulations, but I have a feeling that this would not fly in the US. Let's take a look at the ride's layout. It rolls out of the station and then takes a right-hand U-turn before it climbs up the 68-foot lift. It has a very shallow first drop, and then up into another U-turn, and then another big drop, up over a hill, and then a small drop into another U-turn, into a straightaway, and a bigger drop, a twist up into another U-turn, a twisted airtime hill, a pop up into another U-turn, a twist down into 2 airtime hills, and a final U-turn into an airtime hill, and then you pop into the brakes. Back to the station. To put it simply, it's 3 laps around its footprint, with each lap getting smaller and more compact. Not the most inspired layout. So this is better than a 306-foot B&M coaster how? It's all about what this ride does to your body. There's 2 ways to ride this thing, in the front or in the back. I started off in the back, and my final 2 rides came in the front. I should also mention that I was with Josh, a coaster enthusiast from Vancouver, who could navigate this park with his eyes closed, so he served as our tour guide for the day. He said the back is fun, but you legit think you're gonna die, and the front offers a different experience. I'm a back row rider, so I went straight for that. Here's how the ride shakes out in the back. And I know there's always that one person in the comments who will say this, so let me do this for you. I'm gonna start mentioning ejector airtime a lot, so get ready for it. First drop. Not much. It's too shallow. Second drop after the turnaround seriously yonks you out of your seat. Alexa, what's the definition of yonk?
Yonk. When a janky old coaster gives you some mad stupid airtime.
This is the first great moment of air. The airtime dip afterward, not much in the back. Then you drop off the straightaway, which is another violent and jarring moment of airtime. Those first two big drops are the craziest parts of the ride in the back. The next airtime hill gives decent airtime. And then the back-to-back airtime hills provide some painful ejector after you crest the hill and you're on the way down. The final airtime hill gives a little air, and then the ride is over. If you're into powerful pops of ejector airtime, the back seat is where you want to be. There are 4 moments of serious ejector airtime in the back. For my personal preference, the airtime was violent, but it's not my favorite kind of airtime. I like when the airtime is a little more sustained, like you get on a Camelback, whether it be floater like on a B&M Hyper, or ejector like on an RMC. Coaster flings you hard into your metal bar, and then right back down into your seat in a split second. So I came off with 2 thoughts. Yes, the airtime was just as powerful as advertised, but I didn't love the ride that much. So Josh told me to try the front. Another long, painful wait in the hot sun. We got the front row, and this was definitely a different experience. Just like the back row, the first drop didn't do much in the front other than feel all the wind in my face, but nothing in terms of forces. The second drop that yonks you out of your seat in the back doesn't do anything for you in the front, but you make up for it on that next little airtime dip. You get nothing in the back, but as you crest that hill, you get violently tossed out of your seat. The drop off the straightaway is great in the back, but not so much in the front. That next airtime hill has solid air as you crest over the top, and then there's the back-to-back airtime hills. These are insane in the back, but they're even better in the front. When the train hits the top of the hill, you go absolutely flying, and it's one after the other, each one delivering powerful ejector airtime. The final airtime hill and the pop into the brakes also give some solid airtime. Another great thing about the front is that some of those turns give some good airtime as you pop into them, especially in the second half where the train really flies into those turns. This is something you're missing out on when you're riding in the back. The airtime in the front is also different than the back because it's less violent, but it is more sustained. Because of this, I like the front more than the back. I think you should experience the coaster in both rows. It's a more fun, enjoyable ride in the front, but there's nothing quite like a back row ride anywhere else in the world. Combine those forces with those restraints, and you have a ride that you can't believe actually exists. It does feel dangerous in the back row considering the amount of space between you and the lap bar. Even though I wouldn't trade that lap bar for anything because it's so free, flying into that hard metal bar is painful. If you're a hardcore coaster fan, you'll be more than happy to take that pain for that ejector airtime. But all that being said, I enjoyed the slightly less insane but more sustained ejector airtime in the front. After those 2 rides, we explored the park. It was extremely hot and it was extremely crowded. But luckily, we were able to pick up the other 2 credits without waiting too long. They have an SBF spinner and an E&F Miler kiddie coaster. We also hit up the drop tower and the Ferris wheel. They had lots of other rides, but the lines weren't worth it. I wanted to try the Beast, their KMG claw ride, but it was down, and it had been down for a few weeks. Apparently, it had been spewing oil a couple weeks before. Their Vekoma corkscrew is also still standing, even though it gave its final rides in 2018. So at least I got to see it. You can't really get great shots of coaster from the park, so the best thing to do is to leave the park and walk down the employee road, which takes you right next to the coaster. And that's where I was able to get some good angles. We had time for one more ride, and just looking at the line, the wait time was about the same as before. One thing to look out for is the Rapid Pass. The park skipped the line system. This works out well if you buy it, but as someone who is waiting in the regular line, this slowed down the line to practically a standstill for that final afternoon ride. It wasn't really an issue in the morning, but people started streaming through that Rapid Pass line, and with the one train ops, it was a real drag. Especially in that unshaded queue. We finally got up to the station and had a chance for a second ride in the front or a second ride in the back, and I took the front. Give me that sustained ejector air over the near-death experience of the back row. We got out of the park in the late afternoon and back to the wonderful air-conditioned car. So the final verdict on coaster. Believe the hype on that airtime. You won't find airtime that violent with a restraint that free anywhere else. If there's anything stronger with that type of restraint, let me know in the comments below, because I have to think if that exists, it wouldn't be safe. Coaster seems borderline. No seatbelt, just that bar. And like I said, I'm surprised there's never been an incident on this ride that I could find. I don't mean to sound like a crazy ignorant GP claiming that coasters aren't safe or anything, but with all the accidents that you've heard about on coasters where the lap bars are much more restricting, it's still surprising that over 62 years, Coaster has a clean track record. So the airtime did not disappoint. But where does it land on my top 50? I gave it a spot at number 50. That's really good. It's in the top 12% of coasters I've ridden. It's just not quite that ultra elite coaster that some people say it is. I chalk this up to personal preference because I like more sustained airtime. And even though it's more sustained in the front, it's not quite up to the quality of RMCs or other coasters in my top 50. I still found a spot for it in my top 50 because it's so different and it really is a coaster enthusiast dream. So let's circle back to the start. Is this the best coaster in Canada? I like Leviathan and Behemoth more. Not a whole lot more, but I'm not one to say that Coaster is the best in the country over those gigantic B&Ms. But I can definitely respect anyone who says it is. Sometimes coasters don't live up to the hype. I'm looking at you, Phoenix. And I was afraid Coaster would be another Phoenix, but it's not. It's utterly insane. If you're a coaster fan and you're anywhere near the Pacific Northwest, get to Vancouver. Try to do it when the PNE Fair is not going on, and get at least 2 rides on Coaster, one in the front and one in the back. You won't regret that experience. And frankly, this is by far the best coaster in the Pacific Northwest. They need a coaster like this because there's not much else up there. And this is the big draw that gets people like me to go there. Not just to see the Final Destination 3 coaster. Though, if you're into coasters and movies, Coaster was featured in the 2004 movie Riding the Bullet. If you've ridden Coaster, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Were you disappointed, or did it meet or exceed your expectations? And do you think that this is the best coaster in Canada? You better answer quick, because Green Lantern is on its way, and it could give Coaster a run for its money.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.